just met people that are like 10xing what they're doing on a daily basis. And I had to come home from that and look myself in the mirror and say, how are you going to do that in the next year? What do you, so this was like in September, and so how are you going to change before January? What goals, how are you going to make yourself add more value each year?
Wing It Podcast, goosedigital.com, episode 99. Who do we have?
Kevin Butler.
Chris O'Neill.
Chris Adams.
Michael Turksani. Wait, am I always last? I think we are. Welcome. Welcome,
guest.
Chris Adams.
thank
we have
you.
a guest today. We have the first four-way podcast in a while.
Yeah.
We're wearing these awesome glasses, which Chris is going to run us through. But yeah, so this is the second. You were on episode... We don't know the number.
I'm going to say something in the 30s.
In the
Maybe
30
30s,
range. It was
30s
COVID.
to 40s
It was
range.
COVID.
It was
Maybe
COVID
even the
times.
50s. It was
Later
COVID
COVID,
range, and it
mid-COVID.
unfortunately was not in person.
It was on Zoom.
Yeah.
Yeah, brutal.
It was still a good time.
It was a good time, but we
Right.
don't like the Zooms
No.
as much anymore. So
Yeah, it's great to be here in person.
yeah, so awesome. So why are you here? Let's talk a little bit about your background and what we're doing together.
Yeah. So we're calling this the Road to Reignite, which is a tech conference, ecosystem conference that's held in Muskoka on September 19th to the 21st. And so down here, when Collision Summit is happening, we also have an after-party takeover event for Reignite, where we bring in like-minded individuals like venture capital and angel investors, innovators and leaders and founders, and we bring them all together because we believe that when all of them are together, we have this right ecosystem mix for them to talk and discuss and find new ways to work together.
Beautiful.
And then, Chris invited me down here, and it's really great to see your new office here. It looks awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Our new studio. Go, Chris. I feel like you...
Hey, so I was going to say I attended Reignite last year. It was a very inspiring conference. There was seemed like a couple hundred people there. Maybe there's 130, 140 people, all, to Chris's point, like-minded, creative people that were developing business. Number of speakers coming in with experience in different areas, mostly like scaling, mostly around, growing from various stages of development. A lot of tech, but not all. Some, insurance, financial services, things like that. But my take on that weekend was, I think sometimes we get into a bit of a role. We do the things that we do without necessarily kind of reflecting too much on why it is that we're doing them, or the how they fit with what's happening, with the changes that are taking place in terms of the way business is done, the way that digital is done. And further discussion with Chris around, how is it that a company like Goose Digital wants to kind of contribute in these, these sort of earlier stage, areas where we've been, focused a lot of our work is with, sort of established marketing teams. We want to sort of, start working with organizations that have different needs, maybe not just additional hands on deck to kind of establish that. To sort of work with an existing plan, but to help actually construct and help create growth within the organization, whether it's a team of 10 to 12 or a team of 20 to 25, smaller firms that are looking to kind of start that process towards revenue growth, sustained revenue growth, and that's a discussion that we had, and contributing to this Reignite audience is something that I really wanted to do. So here we are.
To that point, like I think you nailed it on Goose's typical target audience, but I think the DNA, the very bones of Goose Digital is in fact building businesses, right? It's very entrepreneurial, and the core leaders and strategists of Goose have significant experience in that sort of 0 to 2 million ARR. And I think that part, that muscle of the business doesn't get flexed enough. So I think this provides a really good value prop for this kind of audience who are in the earlier days of their business, who are looking to grow quickly, to scale rapidly, and take advantage.
So why don't we get a bit of a backstory on you, Chris, and your, what you're up to now, what you've been up to, what you're up to now, and then we can keep riffing on the reignite.
Yeah, absolutely. I was telling Chris on the way down here, in the late '90s, I joined Case Tech, which was an insurance company run by Young Woo, who is right now the executive director at Mars Discovery. And there I was a junior person, and when I showed up on the first day of the interview, they said, do you play any musical instruments? And I was like, yeah, I play guitar. And they're like, perfect. Well, you're starting on Monday, and make sure you bring your gear because the band practice starts Friday night, and you're in the band. And so then I didn't know if I got hired because of my musical skills or as a junior engineer. And it was great experience working for Young in his startup. That company actually ultimately got bought by Oracle and is now part of their insurance division of their Oracle offering. After that, I started a digital company very much like Goose Digital, and that ran. It was called CGK by the names of the founders at the time. And within that professional service company, we did custom web development or web designs and SEO and PPC. And this is in the days when if you bought, this is when even like Google's PPC program wasn't even there. You had all kinds of, you had Overture and things, and you were buying ads we were buying ads for 1 cent.
Yeah.
And then you had to explain to a business person, hey, it's okay if we drop $100 because it's totally cool because it was 1 cent. Nowadays, that same strategy might be $25 a lead. So it's a whole different game now. This is why we have to be really careful about our metrics. From CGK, we birthed a company called Hot Banana, and it was a web content management system. It was pre-WordPress. We were definitely forward thinking because the category web content management had just been established, and we really thought we only had tools, and then we added some workflow and some auditing and some reporting, and then that became like a web content management system. We moved that into a sideco, its own official company, and then CGK became the world's first reseller of Hot Banana, and then my job at that point in time was jumping over to Hot Banana and going around the world and signing up agencies in New York and Singapore and Dubai and Brussels and San Francisco, like everywhere.
Yeah.
And we were global and people were utilizing it, and within about a year of doing that, we were on the road show with ExactTarget and Salesforce in North America. And then we got a knock on the door by a company called Lyris. Lyris was a publicly traded company in San Fran at the time. They said, hey, we're buying ClickTracks Analytics, which was the competitor to Google at the time, and this company called Email Labs, and we want you basically and our team. We had about 50 people in Barrie, Ontario. Then I reverse commuted to the Valley, and we were basically building out like a HubSpot product for Lyris at the time. It had like the built-in landing pages and the workflow management from email all the way, to scenario-based marketing that we see typically in these new age CRMs today.
Yeah.
What year would that have been?
This was in 2007.
Cool. Okay.
Pre 2008 crash. Which was interesting, and then 2009, after our mandatory management sort of duties for 2 years as part of the buyout, decided to start another company. It was called G-Shift, and G-Shift was this concept of Google Shift. It was this idea that we were seeing that the website was more of the touchdown zone. It wasn't where your brand was going to be discovered on the football field. You had to sort of get YouTube videos, you had PR, Twitter was just coming out, social media, all of these things, blogs. So you had, how does an agency manage all of these touch points and try to report back those metrics in that growth? And then G-Shift basically collected all of that data on a monthly basis and put it into a beautiful report where you could add in your notes. And as agencies, you didn't have to bill and spend time on copying and pasting and providing trending data you could actually add value, bill your clients, and truly like provide strategy on top of the data. So that was really cool, and we got venture capital funding, and again, I think at peak time we were about 45 to 50 people in Barrie again. It was ultimately acquired by a company out in Vancouver that was in some enterprise content management, and that was around the 2016-17 timeframe. I then started Adams Hamilton, which is a play off my name, but I wanted to create a brand other than just Chris Adams Consulting.
Sure.
Because I was looking at like how do you potentially build a firm sort of mentality on this. And Adams Hamilton was around looking at how do you look at shareholder value differently, or how do you look for unique opportunities? Even if you're a $10 million manufacturing company, how are you going to look to make that shiny, a little bit more shiny than your other neighbor across the street? Or how do you get an exit if you're a software company?
Okay.
And so it was all about trying to engineer the exit. And I learned a lot about that from Hopadana and G-Shift in terms of like using PR and momentum-based sort of marketing to showcase that and layer that on top of your growth.
Yeah.
You can't just use all your ammo on day one. You have to strategically think about how you're building your tribe and how you're building your influencers and your network, and then layering in that marketing on top of it for growth. And then in between Adams Hamilton, I'm a mentor at Georgian College's Innovation Center for TMU, or Ryerson University's DMZ accelerator.
Oh, yeah.
And I've been recently appointed to be a intellectual property mentor for this new Intellectual Property of Ontario division. And within that, the Ontario government's supercharging grant writing and patenting and trademarking. And so you can sign up as a tech company and get a $30,000 grant, and that can pay for your legal fees for the trademarking in Canada and the US and or provisional patenting.
Wow.
And so over the last year, I probably have supported about 6 different patent submissions in Ontario personally.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
So there's some fun things. And then I wasn't busy enough, as you guys are aware. And
Yeah.
so there was this opportunity of Reignite and this concept. And I learned it, and I have to give kudos to the guys that started this conference called Fireside. And that was pre-COVID. I had the opportunity to go to this camp, and it was the most amazing experience. All kinds of like-minded individuals. And then, in reality, going to these trade shows, which we're going to talk about shortly, we want to meet people to potentially do business or expand our horizons. But ultimately, what I got from Fireside was, you know what, Chris, I had to look myself in the mirror afterwards and say, hey, you've got game, you're doing good, but you just met people that are like 10xing what they're doing on a daily basis. And
Sure.
I had to come home from that and look myself in the mirror and say, how are you going to do that in the next year? What do you? So this was like in September, and so how are you going to change before January? What goals? How are you going to make yourself add more value each year? So that's what I got out of that. And then Reignite was, I just went to this event called the New Farm, which is out in Creemore, and I saw the Strumbellas play on Saturday night, and they had food and art and music. And so I took that old concept of Fireside and this new concept of food and art and music and fused them together. And the opportunity was there was no one constructing this ecosystem in Ontario. Everybody was sort of isolated in their own town. No one was sort of being the independent to say, hey, let's all interact. Let's move leads around as they need to move them around as companies are going to be growing. Maybe in theory, if you're growing your company in Barrie, as an example, your next stage of funding should be in Toronto. And if you're getting your funding in Toronto and you're growing, then technically your next stage of funding should be in New York, Boston, Chicago, or San Francisco. And you should be thinking about these waves of growth. and utilizing the ecosystem. Or you could be, let's say, in AI, and just maybe you need to be more in Waterloo, or maybe you need to be more in
Right.
downtown Toronto, and from there,
Right.
maybe you then need to be in the valley.
Sure.
So we need to understand that the ecosystem has to work. We need to know the players in it, from the patent lawyers to the right accounting teams as you're growing, to do cross-border transactions and taxation. Like all of these things need to be trained and understood here in Ontario. And so this is what
That's interesting, yeah.
Reignite's about. And as Chris was saying, we had 72 in the first year, 140 in the second year, and I expect 180 campers this year.
Yeah, of which we'll be part of.
Yeah, I'm really excited about that. And as Chris talked about, we have 4 panels, AI, MedTech, funding, and there's a new panel that was introduced called Revenue Operations, or RevOps. And it was really spun around a theme. When I was talking to venture capital and angel investors, the theme was, hey, I think we have a problem on the sales side of all these companies. We're really great at getting the product market fit, getting the alpha product out, getting some initial founder sales, people that we know to sell, but crossing that chasm or scaling that jump
Yeah.
to the real buyers of the product, that's super hard.
Yeah.
And we're kind of scoring weak in that in Canada, if not Ontario. So the concept of putting in this revenue operations panel was to start this conversation to really hone in on, sales is great. It's a great thing to think about. Exactly how are you going to get there? How are those metrics going to pull? If you are going to do another funding round a year and a half from now, how do you reverse engineer the metrics that you need to prove your valuation and prove that you can go to that next level?
I'm sure you're seeing a lot of this in different aspects of business. The whole concept of, there's an aging group of people, a lot that retired after COVID even, that were the leaders of these areas of business, generally all areas really. But I know that I've talked to people in their companies and in the insurance space and manufacturing and all different spaces where the sales side of it is really has been challenging for them. Getting the next generation of sales people to come up and learn how to go about managing accounts and how to go about selling. I think it's also, we're in a different place than we were even 10 years ago, where getting in touch with people. I mean, we've got a branch office here, but there's people working from home all the time, right? So you've got this whole different nature of work that's been going on, but I know that it's been really difficult to bring this next generation of salespeople up.
On top of that, the buying behaviors have totally changed too, for kind of some of the same reasons, but also different ones.
Absolutely.
And then we have this growing influx of technologies and software that can theoretically support some of this, but to the point on RevOps, we don't have a lot of leaders with a lot of great experience how you can actually use these technologies and tools, processes around it to infuse that, to get value from it. So there's a lot of dynamics going on in this new market of selling.
Yeah.
We're entering. I mean, SaaS obviously had its growth curve in terms of we obviously sold software. Hey, this is a project. It's $100,000. You buy it. It's yours. And then now, obviously, Salesforce was sort of the pioneer in the early days of saying, hey, no software. Let's go.
Yeah.
Kind of like monthly fees. And then monthly fees sucked because the revenue didn't come in to support the business model. So we started doing let's sell you 1 quarter or 1 year or 2 year upfront sort of SaaS agreements. We're now in the moment of time where SaaS has now turned into, there's some transactional items that one could sort of sell on top of the actual SaaS. So then therefore, if you're a larger company, you're paying more than the smaller company using the same sort of software.
Yeah.
And then now we're getting into an interesting time where you're going to throw AI on top of that.
Right.
Now you're going to have to charge it by unit. like how, like again, a transactional unit cost on how many AI sort of functions are being done on your data sets.
Like a usage
on it,
fee and yeah.
right? So we're getting in. Who's training that? Who's talking about it? How are, let's share exactly how people are going to be utilizing those business models.
And I think there's the going back to the 2007 to 2013 kind of range that a lot of the mentors have, in terms of that experience. And then you get into, say, like a G Shift would have probably been caught in this, where there's hundreds of different SaaS products, right, that do the same thing. And really the ones that broke out were not necessarily the ones that had the best tech. They were the ones that actually cracked this revenue operations or this new way of, like you said, buyer engagement, inbound, whatever you want to call it, plus, the ability to sell them, right? And that's a real change from the earlier days of tech, where you could actually make an argument that we've got something that only a handful of other companies have, and the market's quite large, and we should be able to make a decent run at it. Whereas all of a sudden you turn around and you're talking about one of these products, an application that does X, Y, and Z, and there's 40 of them, 50 of them out there, right? All taking a sliver of everything. And I think in some ways, the big companies, the sales forces of the world, like, for every billion or 10 billion they're doing in revenue, they're just spinning off a whole economy underneath them of small little companies that can exist, a $20 million this, a 20 that are kind of CRMs that are just doing something similar to Salesforce because they've proven the model. So it's challenging, I think, for a lot of, that like you said, I think we could maybe talk about this, Chris, like, not want to say traditional thinking because it's really inside of 15 years, but the more traditional way of going about and launching these companies. We all remember the tech founder that, he's in a hoodie and you're like, oh, like, we don't even know what he does, but he's doing something. Let's just give him money. Those days are gone now. I mean, I would even argue like maybe AI, there's still a bit of that, but even that, people are going to learn pretty quickly, the dark art or whatever's going on there and be able to put a model around it. So, I mean, how does that change when you see these companies that are coming on the scene with presenting a business plan to you, presenting all this stuff, and how is that different now?
Yeah, there's definitely some changes, I would say, probably because of higher interest rates and the potentiality if someone was to allocate cash as an investor into the market, say NVIDIA, that had a great growth rate in 1 year. So you have this competition for dollars right now. So if you're a venture capitalist or an angel investor, you're saying to yourself, like, okay, why exactly am I investing in your company? So I think you're right. These newer founders need to be very like ship shape. They have to really know their metrics when they're getting that funding. Sometimes they do this. I'm seeing a lot of this milestone-based financing. You're not getting like $1 million today, but I'll give you $250 right now. You say in your model to come back in 6 months, you're going to burn 50 grand a month-ish or whatever that is, and you should be here with your metrics based on your business plan. When you present us again, we'll unlock, stage 2 and stage 3. So I think there's more of an onus of truly owning these metrics and truly owning your sales, and there's no room anymore for sort of like excuses.
Sure.
The downside to that is there's less creative marketing and idea generation, and sort of, it's possible that I might have found the idea 12 months from now versus 6 months.
I'm a little bit more constrained, a lot more constrained than I maybe would have been before.
Yeah, so we're seeing that a lot in the angel sort of circuits, and there's definitely some discussion around this milestone-based financing, and then Reignite is sort of around, it's like we call it like a relay race, and I'm passing that baton on, to the next person in the race. And so friends and family and some advisors or accelerators sort of help in that first part of the race, and then you're kind of trying to hand this baton on to the angel investors and maybe some higher level thinking individuals that have done it before on your advisory team. And then you're kind of moving that down the road to the potential other angel investors in a different jurisdiction, like maybe in Silicon Valley or New York City, or it could be venture capital, depending upon how fast you're sort of moving in your scaling.
Right.
One of the things we saw sort of in like the last super cycle of investing and sort of that 10, 11-year bull run was the sort of emergence of services or value add services from top VCs. They're bringing in marketing experts, sales experts, whatever is required in this like suite of additional services to help their investments grow and grow faster. I'm just wondering, at the angel stage for you, are you hyper involved in finding these advisors and additional people that can help this business grow and kind of help your investment too?
For sure, and I'm on the selection committee for the Georgian Angel Network, and part of what we require is that you're being, you're part of an accelerator somewhere, an innovation center or an accelerator, because it's like a checkbox and saying, okay, these people we're going to be potentially investing in, it looks like they're coachable. I think that's a strong sort of indicator for like founders that are going to be investable. Mm-hmm. Are you coachable? Are you willing to listen to other individuals that have sort of done it before? To your point, there's more and more focus now on making sure that just these founders do have a coach or an advisory board, are part of an accelerator, and part of the ecosystem. And why that matters too is that then you can leverage dollars. So if we re-raise $1, maybe there's a funding mechanism with the Ontario Centres of Innovation where they might match that $1.
Right.
Maybe when you do that, we can then qualify for a bank loan, or maybe we can qualify for some sort of other grant that might come in. And therefore, we can sort of leverage that $1 that's coming in and maybe make it $3 of sort of strategic value. And so there needs to be a lot of thinking around that packaging in that moment.
Right.
And again, I think that's why the ecosystem really needs to come together, because if you can't see that pattern, it's hard to take all these building blocks that are available to you in Ontario, and then when do you want to stack them at the right time?
Yeah. And on the marketing and sales front, or the rev ops front, one of the things you said, which I thought was really good, and got me thinking about, the buying journey has changed. Like the evaluations that occur and the expectation on the buyer that their questions can be answered without having to talk to someone or having to, take that extra time, I think is really a shift. I don't want to necessarily have to get on an engagement to have what might be a simple question or like one of my check marks to occur, right? I don't want to have to go through that friction.
Yep.
And I've seen, and I think this is maybe an interesting point just around guidance to the new organizations that are coming online, is that I've seen a lot of decisions. I mean, I think like we've all seen our own behavior online where the site itself may not be the best experience from a creative, it may not be the most latest and greatest, but it has the right information, and actually it's where I'll end up making the decision. And it might be something for a home, it might be something for a business, but because all the information that I needed was there, I would actually use that site over maybe another site that is flashier, newer, seemingly has a better experience, but doesn't have all that information. And I think, that's just like what you said, a critical insight. I think one of the things that all companies can do is ask as many questions about their product offering, what questions that people are going to have about our offering, and make sure that content is available to somebody at all times. Because we're looking at some software right now, and one of the ones that we're going with happens to be one that provides so much information. And like we've said earlier, it may not be the best technical product. There might be a better one out there, yes, but I don't want to sit through 3 demos and five hours of meetings to try to sift through that. I want to spend that same 5 hours evaluating myself to determine who am I going to reach out to. So I can only do that if they provide the right information, right?
Yeah, I think there's two. If we break down that, I love that, and then there's 2 things that you kind of talked about, like. From a marketing perspective, there's the awareness and the sort of the decision making and potentially even post-sale sort of marketing that Goose Digital more has a great awareness on. And a lot of individuals concentrate on that easy part, that just the awareness part, like a few blogs, a few videos, some PPC. But you're not, you need the how do you get the right case studies and the financial sort of backing on exactly. If I put $1 in, it's going to give you a $10 sort of value, and the CFO can sign off on that. You need all this information packaged nicely, and at the right kind of appropriate time. So I love that that part that you were talking about. And then the second part is just around the change of before in the early, like a 2010s kind of talk, a lot of companies didn't have any systems.
Yep.
So it was really easy to say, hey, you know what, I'm going to jump on Hootsuite right now, or I'm going to jump on Salesforce, because I got nothing over here except for maybe an Access database.
Yeah, or an Excel
right? And you're
spreadsheet.
like, let's do this. So
Yeah.
But now a decade later, we've been SaaS to death, and we have these tech stacks of like 12 to 15 things, all of which are like kind of, they're not implemented with a full-blown strategy.
Yep.
So what's happened is they're kind of doing little bits here and there, and the data's getting completely messed up throughout this like daisy chain of technologies without a big vision.
Yep.
Half of the technologies you probably don't need. And then we're kind of starting to make decisions based on
But now
this.
you have to displace that technology if you're a new one coming up, right?
Yeah, and so if you're a new company trying to get in there and you're trying to, on day one, without any kind of backing or case studies, hey, drop everything that you're doing and jump on mine because it's going to be awesome. And so you're asking this company to go, I'm betting on this new technology, and I have to move, and I have to imagine the friction internally to like take all that data and kind of morph it into this new way of doing it, and then the change management to train everybody.
Yeah.
They don't. I actually had a conversation last week with someone where like the biggest reason they don't is not money, it's change management. Just like you're saying, there's processes that have to be defined. It's sort of maybe a little bit of ego internally. You're asking perhaps your sales teams 10, 20
Plus, they
people.
don't believe you anymore. I think
Well, that's true
back
too.
in the day, you had more of a shot at saying this is going to be a better system.
Yes,
And,
we've all
but
been
now
sold the
we've all
dream.
been sold that dream,
Yeah.
and we've been told that once, and then twice, 3 times, and we realize
But
actually.
even so, I do think that's a critical call out. But even you have like modern technologies for sort of the modern buyer. Let's say you've actually got that right. Now you're going to go ask this go-to-market team of sales and marketing professionals, maybe even executives, to adopt a totally new way of doing things to support a totally new way of buying. It all makes sense, except humans are humans, and changing behaviors of adults, particularly successful adults, is very difficult. And it just doesn't happen. And it doesn't happen anywhere near as quickly as they would need to actually address and respond to market changes.
Yes.
I think for somebody that's that's using a bunch of technology, I think that's absolutely true. I was thinking about from the venture capital's sort of view of things, though. When I think about, and I was thinking about Moneyball. I was thinking about the way that they went from sitting around a table talking about whether a guy stood up straight at the plate or like what his swing looked like. And that was the basis of the decision. And now these venture guys, I presume, Chris, and I want to sort of ask, like, do sort of early stage folks, do they have the data to to ease the mind of the capitalists? So do they is there have we turned the corner now where you have to have a certain investment in those metrics on the products that deliver the metrics, so that the venture capital can see the same thing that you do? In other words, it's not like a entrepreneur saying, you know what, I can see this happening. Super salesperson goes into a meeting with a bunch of venture capitalists and comes out there with a great big chunk of money. That happened like 20, 25 years ago. Now, in order to kind of have that that output of a meeting, what do you actually need to be able to prove, and how much of it has to be digital? Like, that's kind of what are people looking at?
It's a great question, and maybe I'll add a couple things to it. So one, I think, if you were a 2 or 3 times founder that may have exited previously, you have what we would maybe call privilege. The privilege to talk to venture capital and say, hey, I've done this before. I have a decent business plan, but give us some money and a little bit of time, and I will I will do it again. And
Right.
more than
Credibility,
likely, you'll say, how did that person raise money again on a cocktail napkin? And you'll be like, wow, that's amazing. But 90, probably 5% of people have to have a really great understanding of their business plan, their total addressable market, maybe in their first year, truly understanding their serviceable, obtainable market, like what exactly could you really get in the first year with limited cash and limited personnel.
How do you look at it? We talk about this a lot, founder-led sales versus sort of like a sales-led sales. And like what I mean is it's always easier for the founder to go and make this sale. They've got unprecedented levels of charisma, but they also have influence over everything the product can do. And maybe sometimes overconfidence in what the product can do too, whereas a classic salesperson goes in and just, it's not the same. So when you're thinking about investing, how do you look at what's been done historically on a founder-led sales process, recognizing in order to scale, at times you're gonna have to add to that, if not remove the founder, he or herself.
I've been obviously in those situations personally in life, right?
Yeah.
From being that passionate salesperson on, hey, this is what we have, and then coming back to the office and telling the engineering team, guess what, we gotta get that little feature done in the next 2 months because I just sold it to someone and I know I don't have it, but we're gonna do it. It's gonna be great. And so the engineering team always loved me. And where you're going on that is it'd be interesting to take a look at, obviously, if you were going to attract larger amounts of money or scale faster, it'd be really great to prove that it's not the founder selling.
Yeah, exactly.
And there's actually a method, a process that has been engineered. And if we get money to hire some people to work the phones and the emails and be on the road, and we drop that into that machine, when I put $1 in, it produces $10 on the outside of shareholder value. Where you're going to attract a lot of money if you can prove that model works.
Yeah, exactly. That's where the premiums start to kick in.
If you're probably not going to attract a lot of money until you get that done, because again, it's just the founder, and the founder can only scale for so long.
Yeah.
Before you say, I only have 2 hours a day to do sales, and that's why we didn't make our target in the quarter. And we've heard that before.
Oh, yeah,
right?
I bet. Of course.
And there's nothing wrong with the company. The company's amazing technologies, but just not enough time in the day for conversations to occur with that 1 or 2, let's say, salespeople.
Yep. Makes sense. I think we've all worked for, I don't know, founders who have like what I call creative exercises in SOWs and deals.
Well,
We're not pointing
Hey, that's-
anybody out here.
okay, the one deal I do a year, it's going to be creative, okay? It's going to be creative.
And it always works out good. It
Yeah.
always works out well.
Always love reviewing those SOWs. Like, wait, what did you promise?
Yeah.
We do what now?
We just added a service. We just added a new service.
But sometimes, just to put perspective on there, sometimes adding a little bit each year, it's almost like, I don't know if anybody sails in the room, I sail. And when the wind sort of shifts, you sort of have to feel it in the boat, and you're going to try to inch up into that to take advantage of it from the other competitors. And if you let that wind go by, other people could be kind of coming up on you, and that could be the difference between losing a race.
Sure.
So when you're
conversely,
think of this as like testing the wind and maybe throwing out something a little bit out there each year to say, can we do a little bit more of this? And just maybe there's a sweet spot for the company.
I was going to say, just to be fair to like the creative writing comment, is like sometimes we've looked back on things and well, that was an amazing call because it's opened up a lot more opportunity elsewhere, or it's better positioned us, going to your sales analogy of how we can continue the race in an advantageous way. So I think sometimes it does work out too.
That's interesting what you said about how they view sort of founder-led sales and sort of I won't say the incremental value or the additional kind of value that they can raise when they've sort of cracked that sort of concept. Have you guys seen companies where you've kind of, do they prove that out over a 2-year period or some sort of period of time where you guys can look back and say, yeah, we kind of now understand what their sales cycle looks like and what their ability to do deals without the founder looks like?
Yeah, so we've seen that firsthand in the Barrie area or in the Toronto area with a number of companies that I've even advised as well. There's a few things that sort of happen in that sort of pseudo time frame is that you could be raising a little bit of money for some angels. And when you try to sort of test that, let's say crossing that chasm from these innovator type people that are buying your product to sort of more mainstream people, and you're trying to figure out how do you get to that new level of buyer or where the market needs to be. You could, if you don't get that mark, if they're only giving you a little bit of money, your leeway is very short, and you can get yourself into what we call the trough of sorrow. It's a dark place where you go, and as a founder and entrepreneur, a lot of mental health problems, like things aren't going right. There's a lot of pressure on you to perform, and there's a lot of individuals in that zone, right? Now there could be a dawn in the day where the sun rises and things are starting to occur again, and typically that's when you're kind of found that moment in time when the marketing has kicked in or the sales strategy has kicked in, and you may have found your tribe, your serviceable, obtainable market. That's is how we talk to these people. This is amazing. If we can scale that, then we can do even more and move from there. Okay. There's some strategies we could talk about here depending on time or another show as well, but I have this concept of, like with software companies, I call it the remora effect. Try not to be a shark at the beginning of time. Try to be that little fish under the shark that eats all the crumbs that fall out of the shark's mouth. And so I always try to get people to think about channel partnerships and partnerships in general. And sort of start in a small little spot, eat some of those crumbs, and learn from the shark, and build your team, and then potentially raise money when the timing is right, when you know your data points. Because if you do raise a little bit too quickly, you don't get that product market fit or the marketing fit, you could kind of fall into this trough of sorrow.
Right. And I think we hear that a lot, right? The whole being first to market is sometimes a huge burden. And this is like the whole Apple thing, right? They're never truly first at something. They just take what's there and do it better than anyone else can. And we're seeing that again actually with their partnership with Microsoft and OpenAI. That's another great example. But to your point, it's like when you have limited funds, probably not the biggest amount of awareness for what you do with your audience, maybe it's best to swim under the shark, ride some of that wave, learn what you need to, and then when the time is right, probably later on, then it's the time to strike and go big.
Yeah, I think it's great. And again, maybe just coming back to what we're wearing
here
in this
talk
show
about
here
these.
that, and that is these are Reignite official sunglasses, and the tint on your shades are rose colored, rose colored glasses, and that is to provide, hey, how do we see better opportunity when we're looking through a different lens? And what you're talking about there is like looking at opportunity in different stages and recognizing it and having the patience to run the course.
That's right.
The resilience to test things out. And if you're not testing that wind, as you're saying, Michael, and introducing new little things, that's the difference between winning and losing a race.
Maybe we could talk a little bit about the what do you call it? The trough of sorrow.
Trough of sorrow.
Trough of sorrow. Yeah. And kind of the, maybe if you could sort of paint a bit of a picture, because you've been at this now for a while, you've had a lot of experience seeing either your own companies or other people raise money and go through that. Like as a percentage basis, how many of these founders end up in the trough of sorrow?
I would say that there's probably going to be a high probability of going somewhere in that valley. It just depends on how deep you're going to go in any business. And if you don't say that you ever had like a downturn or a little mini trough of sorrow, it just probably means that you've raised so much money that you're burning it and don't really recognize it because it doesn't really matter because you're able to sail right through it without it affecting cash flow. But you would know that things aren't right and we need to steer the ship better, to get to a better, to lower that cash burn. on a monthly basis.
Is there a theme that's come up over the years of like burnout among, founders that are raising money? Has that come up?
Yeah, I think there's, we need to recognize that there is a tremendous amount of pressure on an individual that's there because when you look, you obviously been in business, and there may have been times in the past where you look around and you go, I have 20, 30, 40, 50 people, paychecks, and people paying mortgages, and I have a duty here to make sure that this thing actually works when you wake up in the morning. Now obviously that builds character, as my grandmother would say, but sometimes people take that mental health farther, and there could be other effects in one's life too, on marital relations, or you have a new family that you're trying to raise at home, and the combination of all of those things could be like a perfect storm.
As an aside, do you
Right?
see any trends either way where new entrepreneurs today are better versed in some of these potential pitfalls than say 10 years ago, 20 years ago?
It depends on like the age of the individual. I do see a lot of mature sort of startup founders, which might, when I use that word, it might be more like they're in their 30s or 40s, and maybe they've either done it before, or they're been a professional, or their kids might be a little bit older, and they're not as potentially that they don't really have to have that massive paycheck every single day. Or you could be the younger individual that I might need a little bit of cash to help me through in life, and then at that point there's a lot of pressure to perform within the company because you have employees, plus you have yourself as well. And if you're paying for labor, where's the budget for the sales and marketing at the end of the day, when you're just kind of flowing through possibly paying for labor to get the company to move? And so there is a huge challenge out there. I came from a world where there wasn't really any angel investors or really an ecosystem per se in the early 2000s. There was no, except for the bank manager telling me to get lost. But today we have a unique path to help these younger generation founders. There's a unique formula, or that can be applied to each individual depending on how they want to scale. Want to scale a little bit slower, you want to scale faster at the beginning.
And help them understand what goes into that, like what you said earlier about maybe waiting before you raise too much or at all until you've like cracked some of these nuts. I think that's an important kind of passing down the knowledge to the next generation that's coming through this channel. So, and I think it's probably on both sides. The investors are also so much more educated and aware of like what this looks like than they were maybe 15 years ago. And then, like as you said, I would imagine I don't think you can still have that naivety going on with a new founder, but I think there's a lot more information that they can themselves learn about what does this actually look like, when might be the right, and so those two things coming together, I think, is probably maybe healthier than it could have been in the past. But I think it's important to know that if you're going to be using somebody else's money, that comes with a cost. There's nothing's free. You have to be able to understand that you will have expectations on you, maybe more so than if you were bootstrapping it, right?
Yeah, and there's examples of this. I mean, I remember the story of the Red Hat sort of Linux founder. I think his grandmother wrote him a check for $50,000, and literally, like, that's like $1 billion exit for that gentleman. Like the grandmother was the one that, I love you, go for it, kind of a check. Now everybody doesn't have that kind of grandmother, but if you do, that's probably not a bad way of doing it at the beginning, because it buys you a little bit of room to build the company. Last year at Reignite, we had Kevin Edwards talk. He was the CEO of Skip the Dishes, and he talked about going from, I think, $50 million a year in revenue to $1 billion in like 3 or 4 years. He said it was like a rocket ship. And the founders in Winnipeg were normal people like ourselves that were recognized maybe, hey, we're going to raise a little bit of money to try to scale this thing, but we really need this seasoned coach or CEO to do it, and that happened to be Kevin. And so that's a cool recognition of like, hey, we got this sort of thing here, but we recognize that we might not have the skill set to sort of take it to that next level, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, really
We had Shelby Taylor talk about how she's growing her pasta company out of Collingwood. It's like a Nike brand, chickpea pasta, and I think they're like 72 and 450 high growth companies in Canada.
Wow.
And 10,000 stores in less than 6 years. And she had, her unique perspective being a mom and running like this pseudo tech company, as she calls it, because even though you're making pasta, you're basically a marketing and sales and brand engine, right?
Yeah.
So that's an interesting theme too,
That's
as we
really
come
cool.
into Collision Week. I think it doesn't matter what you're doing today. If your audience is listening and you make tool and die or you do whatever, technically you're a sales and marketing and brand engine in this modern world, and you need to learn how to. And that could be, maybe you don't need deals, but how are you going to attract the next generation and the HR, the right human resource capital that you need to help build that company out? You need to be truly like engaged in social media in your company, and hence I think that's kind of like why digital agencies, you can either choose, you got two doors here. I can choose to potentially hire someone and go, okay, I think I'm going to bet on the fact that this person's in the office 24/7 and can do it. Or you could potentially do door number two, which is, hey, I need to find some people that have done this before, and I need to put in the right frameworks, success frameworks in. I know it's going to cost a little bit more up front, and just maybe I could then train a new internal resource to sort of drive the car afterwards, and have them maybe on as a coach or a mentor afterwards, which is great. Or door number C, both, kind of concept.
Bit of that, yeah.
And I think you're going to find that the more mature companies in the modern world right now are going to probably do door number two, which is pretty much like, hey, let's get some frameworks in place. Let's try to get the right, there's 50,000 options in MarTech. How do we, if we go from stage 1, 2, and 3, what tools do we need for those 3 stages over the next few years? How do we grow between all of those in a roadmap and a view? Let's look back now at how we're going to do it. You say you're going to hire 2 new University of Waterloo, business development people.
Great.
Okay, let's throw them on top of that stack. Let's see how they perform in terms of emailing and or phone calling and the scripts. And let's run the metrics. I think that's
nice.
I would hope to think that that's where people will be choosing in the future.
Yeah, and there's a pretty good chance you're going to get to momentum faster, right? Than hiring someone yourselves, having them build it, and see where that goes.
Yeah, there's a few themes that just to go into that too. On top of this, we have high interest rates. We've got a dollar that's going to be declining in terms of our Canadian economy. The answer really is exporting into the States, doing more sales into the States as a Canadian company. We got to get better at sales. We got to get better at the phone calls, the workflow in terms of saying this is where you're going to go in your 10 stages of closing a deal. And we really need to talk about it more, like on this podcast or going to collisions or going to reignites and learning about these things, because we have to get really great at sales. The Americans are way better at sales than us, probably just because of, could be DNA, or it could be the way that they've been sort of raised or engineered, because they have a larger sort of country than us.
Yeah.
But we really got to get better on the global stage at selling our software and exporting it to the United States.
Yeah. And I also think that, along with that sales kind of comment, because I think managing a cycle is so critical, and being able to do that, well, once you get the interest, I think becoming that, what did you call it? Sales and marketing branding machine or whatever it was. I think, a big part of that is your content strategy. I think that it's not just answering the questions, which I think we already talked about that, having the right content and a lot of it, but I think it's telling stories. And how are you going to tell those stories to your audience? If they're going to be over LinkedIn, and what type of just continuous content can you drive out into the market, so that when you get people on your line who aren't quite ready to bite, but you start to have, awareness in that space, right? Video in particular, video advertising is still so inexpensive. It's pennies a view to be able to push videos in front of target audiences. Now, if you can get the cost, which we've got a bunch of programs for that, get the cost of production down, the distribution is very reasonable. And I think that's going to change. It'll be like the comment that you made, the pennies a click. Well, right now it's pennies a view. That'll change as more people start to really develop good ways to put video in front of their audience. But I think that that's another difference with these companies being able to follow an organization and learn a lot about them over time. And when I'm ready, then you better have, like you said, a capable sales team that can take my hand and lead me down the path. But likely, I'm going to be pretty ready to go by the time I reach out. I think if you're trying to drive a content strategy or a sales strategy that is trying to convince somebody that we talked about earlier, I need to displace your system. You don't even know you have a need, so I'm going to try to sell you. It's very expensive. It's a very expensive proposition. I'm not saying you can't do it, and for some software sales, it's big money if you manage to, get somebody out, so it might be worth the investment. But I think absolutely you have to make sure that if people are looking, if people are in that space, that there is a good amount of content that they can continuously keep up to date with. And that's never the issue, because I think that is the cheapest number one check mark.
Yep.
And then you have a really good, like you said, way to hold their hand once they come in the door, right through to a deal.
Yeah. I think you guys have the unique, perspective to come into certain clients and say, hey, here's your old tech that you're using in your marketing and sales. Great. Don't change too much right now, but let's say for the first year, we've seen this pattern before, someone using that sort of older CRM. What we can do to make things a little bit easier and having less friction, we can layer in 2 or 3 of these sort of new age products that sit on top of that.
Yeah.
It works.
That's right. Yep.
We're able to build a relationship. We're able to do the content. There's less friction. You're going to see some initial inertia or value in our relationship. And just maybe as we learn together, we can start talking to your board of advisors or your board or your shareholders to say, hey, maybe that CRM tech needs to now migrate to a better engine for the future. And here's the reasons why. Here are the 2 choices. And then it buys you that 2 or 3 years of relationship time before you can actually get that larger deal closed.
Right.
Right?
Yeah,
That might be
100%.
the more of the modern way of doing things.
Yep. Well, any other thoughts and comments that we want to leave before we wrap up? That's been 62 minutes. Pretty good. Longest one we've done in a while.
We covered some good ground.
Yeah, I think we
It's
did.
pretty cool, guys, and I look forward to
Great.
seeing all of you on Wednesday night at the pre-Reignite or the Road to Reignite party, after party at Collision. It's coming up in a couple of days, and I appreciate you guys sponsoring as well.
And we look forward to doing the Reignite in September.
September as well.
Yeah, it's gonna be great. There's some really great musical acts, and some
Nice.
the artist in resident has just signed up, and you're gonna get concert posters based on the theme this year, which is opportunities, hence the rose-colored glasses. And that song, or where that theme came from, is from a Pet Shop Boys song in 1984 called Opportunities. I've got the brawn, you've got the brains, let's make lots of money. So I think that theme needs to resonate out there. Doesn't matter what size of company you are. The band that is coming, there's 2. We always try to get like an indie band that's rising in the stars here in Canada. And I'll let you know what that band is. It's a new funk band, and they're on tour across Canada, and they're doing their 2nd album. They're called Brass Camel.
Okay.
And so check them out. And then we have Maestro West or Fresh West coming to
Nice.
camp to talk and also perform. And I think, you know, it's an interesting perspective of someone who embodies being Canadian, being an initial rap star, probably has had thousands of doors slammed on him personally, but he persevered and he conquered and became a rap star from, you know, within Canada, which technically shouldn't happen. It should only happen maybe in the States or something like
Right.
that. And so we have this great guy that's going to come and talk about, you know, visioning, trying, never giving up. And a lot of, if you listen to a lot of his songs and a lot of his lyrics, it's that message has been there since like day one. So
Cool.
we're really pumped about that.
Awesome.
Good.
Well, thank you guys. This was really good. Thanks for making the track.
Thanks for coming in, Chris.
Thanks,
Yeah,
Chris.
thank you.
All right.
Cheers.